sis boom ba.
Hello, Ground Control. I'm Paul, and this is Retrostellar, where streaming media means you're listening to your Walkman in a canoe. Since the beginning of time, humans have tried to predict the future. Will I outrun that saber-toothed tiger? Will it be sunny tomorrow? Will anyone ever read my Nicolas Cage fan fiction? So I've done some digging and come up with a not at all comprehensive list of ways to predict the future. It's a segment I'm calling Fortune Stellar, How to Predict the Future. Part 1, Play a Game. Some folks look to the stars, some read palms, some consult tarot cards. Personally, I'm partial to the magic 8-ball as a source for advice. As long as your question can be answered with a yes or no, it's pretty nifty. In fact, I use it to decide whether or not to take out the trash today. Don't count on it. The magic 8-ball debuted during the spiritualism craze of the early 20th century, a time when self-proclaimed fortune tellers, mediums, and psychics became celebrities. The toy's inventor, Albert Carter, was inspired by the techniques of his clairvoyant mother. He adapted an idea she used in her seances and patented a polygon inscribed with spirit messages floating around in a tube. A Cincinnati toy company bought the idea, first selling it as the Psycho Slate, then the Psycho Seer, and finally adapting it into the spherical toy we now know and love. Stick with me to the end and I'll link you to another video that shows how the mechanism works. I predict you'll like it. The Ouija board is another more controversial fortune-telling game. Teenage girls claim it's for reals, and their moms say it's the road to ruin. In actuality, it's just a game, originally marketed by Parker Brothers, that takes advantage of a physiological phenomenon known as the ideomotor effect. This refers to the stimulation of involuntary muscle movements by the subconscious mind. If you're unconvinced, gather some friends around and play the Ouija board game, twice. The first go-around will blow your mind as you communicate directly with the spirit world. For round 2, put on blindfolds. You'll see the results are quite different as the Ouija planchette spells out gibberish or just lands on an empty space on the board. Regardless, it's a great way to jazz up your next slumber party. Or if you can just play some jazz music, I hear teenage girls love jazz. A third, less sinister game is also popular among middle schoolers. In my day, we called them cootie catchers, but you might know these fortune tellers as whirly birds, paku paku, or salt cellars. It's simply a bit of origami. Paper folded and decorated with colors, numbers, or symbols, guaranteed to tell your future. I remember consulting a cootie catcher in 5th grade and being told that I'd grow up to play quarterback in the NFL and marry Lonnie Anderson. I suppose there's still a chance that could happen? Part 2, Ask an Animal. At some point, human beings realize we aren't particularly great at predicting things, and games are even less effective, so we let animals do it instead. In the United States, the practice has become a national observance. We've declared February 2nd as Groundhog Day, celebrating Punxsutawney Phil, the weather-predicting woodchuck. The American holiday dates back to the 1840s, but it originated in a German custom to consult a badger for his views on the arrival of spring. Despite all the fanfare and cinematic stardom, Punxsutawney Phil isn't particularly reliable. The National Weather Service tells us he's only 40% accurate. My grandma had a bunion that could predict rain 80% of the time, and we never gave her a day. In Vermilion, Ohio, locals consult the woolly bear caterpillar for weather forecasts and celebrate his prognostications at the annual Woolly Bear Festival in September. As I understand it, if the caterpillar grows a thick coat, it's going to be a cold winter. That gives me an idea for a new festival in Florida. Go to the beach and measure the back hair on European tourists. If it exceeds the amount of fabric in their Speedo, we're looking at a hot summer. And then there's Oscar, a creepy cat residing in a Rhode Island nursing home who seems to know when a patient is about to die. Evidently, if Oscar cuddles up in your lap, you're about to be 6 feet under some kitty litter. And when a big sporting event is on the way, such as the Super Bowl, World Cup, or Final Four, you can bet we'll ask an animal to foretell the winner. A German octopus named Paul correctly picked the 2010 World Cup winner, and Sonny the sheep got really good at predicting New Zealand rugby matches. Despite their notoriety, both animals received death threats for their efforts. A few years back, a friend of mine had a parrot choose the winners of his basketball bracket, nabbing him the office pool payout. Not sure if he consulted the bird for trash-talking tips, though. Part 3, Write some sci-fi. The methods that I've shared so far seem rather hit or miss, but there's one really good way to predict the future. Write a science fiction novel. Through the years, authors like Jules Verne, Ray Bradbury, and Isaac Asimov have shared uncanny foresight. In 1865, Jules Verne wrote a novel called From the Earth to the Moon. In the book, he describes an adventure of 3 men shot into outer space by a projectile from a departure point on the Florida coast. 100 years ahead of time, Verne made mathematically accurate calculations about the plausibility of space travel, the sensation of weightlessness, and a method of oxygenating an orbiting space capsule. The book inspired the first workable theories of spaceflight a few decades later. During his 70-year writing career, Ray Bradbury became a master of speculative fiction and foresaw numerous modern inventions long before their discovery. In Fahrenheit 451, his most famous novel, he describes a society that's jacked into seashell earphones and thimble radios, akin to our earbuds and Bluetooth headsets. Flat-screen TVs and digital communities resembling Facebook are referenced in several of his works, and he predicted the invention of self-driving cars, artificial intelligence, and ATMs. Isaac Asimov was celebrated for a prolific career writing both fiction and non-fiction books and articles, many with a focus on science and technology. His brilliance was on early display in a 1964 New York Times article where the author predicted what life would look like in 2014. Asimov describes a world with microprocessor-controlled robots, kitchens with electronic coffee makers and microwave ovens, as well as lab-created food products. He made a series of other spot-on predictions about satellite TV, mobile phones and tablets, and pervasive wireless communication. One might argue that if you fantasize about enough mythical inventions, extrapolate the progress of scientific discoveries, and surmise dozens of potential futures, you'll eventually hit some bullseyes. But it's still cool to track these eerie predictions. And the next time I want to invest some money on Wall Street, instead of calling a stockbroker, maybe I'll call a sci-fi writer or a Pennsylvania woodchuck. Well, I hope I've helped you figure out some ways to look good while looking ahead. If you can suggest some other ways to predict the future, let me know in the comments or message me on Twitter. And before I sign off, here's that link to the video about the Magic 8 Ball. And let me check in one last time with my own Magic 8 Ball. Should my viewers come back for the next episode of Retro Stellar? It is decidedly so. Well, you heard it. Looks like I'll see you again next time on Retro Stellar, remembering yesterday's tomorrow's today.
Describe the sound made when a sheep explodes.
Thank you so much for watching. Please take a second and click the subscribe button to see future videos. Go to overjupiter.com for the best sci-fi, superhero, and pop culture t-shirts on this or any planet. Use the code RETRO15 to save 15% store-wide. See you next time.